night that I have a possibility to present our history of our activity till 2010, as Solop started in 2010, and it's a little bit difficult for me to generalize this 6 year of research and field activity towards the oral history records we made during this time. And now we have like more than 200 different type of the oral history already collected, but as you see, you can find them because the main problem for us was the so-called post-production of this oral history records, just editing and just creating it like the archive item and putting them in like a digital archive system, which was most painful part of our activities. This archive space is still under construction, and we are not able to just give public all our oral history collection to just watch and listen and understand and use in like educational and scientific activities. That's our tragic reality, but we have such a little collection of the oral history records, and as our organization started first research and till today we continue this research line towards the Soviet terror and mass terror of 1937 and 1938, and at the same time base for criticizing our activities that we are only focused on the Soviet terror and we don't see the general picture of the Soviet history. But according to this research line, all like majority, 99% of our history collection is around the Soviet terror, and they are like a testimony of the survivors and the closest members of family of victims of Soviet terror. It's a little bit difficult for me to generalize this like main things because of difference between people we recorded. Some of them are from the different layer of society and with a different education, different profession and different skills of expression, like they are on adventure or like feelings or memories, and I'm sure you just was able to discuss in detail like a technical oral history records and like a philosophy of this activity and ethic and so on and so on, and it would be nice to just put this interaction between us, me and David, like interviewees, to the last part of our speech to share experience how we tested these technologies or rules or basic basic things in oral history interviewing in our practice side, and what was like interesting towards this side, and is it true that it's different on the subject you are dealing with, and is there any like characterizing some issues which affect the general rules of oral history activities or not. It's like a different subject to discuss, and let's just put it to the last part of our speech. And I want to talk about the, as you see in the title of speech, about the meaning of these testimonies and these voices. And it's very easy to explain why these stories are interesting and very necessary to understand like our recent traumatic past, to just describe the situation in like in our society, like environment in the like as the stage of like a collective memory of in our society in 2010 when we started to find first survivors of Soviet terror. It was 6 years ago, and sometimes it's difficult to compare where we are now, which kind of possibility we have, like researchers or just interested people to understand like newest history issues and that time. And sometimes we're joking that it's a complete like a difference between possibilities. In 2010, instead of the fact that it was like a same society we are now, possibility to find and make access on the sources about the modern history and even more find the eyewitnesses was extremely low. You see like now social media and like internet technology and like digital databases and archives are in the top of the like access and influence, and people are just taping subjects they are interested in, and they have the, like a big enough possibility to find something. But in 2010 it was almost impossible. It was like a big trouble for us, like a big beginners, to even find any kind of like a little database about the people who was involved in the historical events, and they were eyewitnesses of some facts which took place during 20th century, because such kind of database doesn't exist even now. And at the same time it was difficult to find any kind of source, I mean the documentary source, to think about how to find a trace towards the person you are interested in, I mean the archival source. And this problem is almost same today, because all archives which contain this kind of data, like the main archive, National Archive, and archive of the former KGB, and the Communist Party archive, are just open towards the declarations. They say that we are open, but the problem is like a double. First of all, some of the main part of these archives are still just restrict, and especially linked with the Soviet terror. For example, in the National Archive, and we have the long war with the officials of National Archive trying to force them open like a archival fund of the State Prosecutor Office of Soviet Georgia, which contains huge data about the victims of Soviet terror, as State Prosecutor was leading the so-called rehabilitation campaign in 1955 till the end of 1960s and at the end of 1980s, and there's a huge base of data about victims and about the analysis of the criminal cases of said people, and same time the original criminal cases which we are in the different archive, I mean archive of KGB. Main part of these criminal cases does not exist because of the fire during Civil War in 1991, and you see it's like the original cases just gone, but the analysis of these cases made in 1955 are still in the different archive, and it's closed, and it's just like a deadlock, and we can't like find the name of the victims and name of the relatives to just find the trace of members of family today and talk with them about the fortune of father and grandfather and so on, and understand how it was and how people suffered. And this is a main problem, like data is still close to trace the people, the eyewitnesses. And another problem is just about the knowledge around archive like a source of modern history. And as in 2010, now like a number of the researchers and people who are interested in the new history who visit archives regularly and use these documental sources are extremely low. Like if compare now and beginning of 2000, like an ordinary person, citizen knows that archive is there, like a national archive and archive of the KGB, and which kind of documents are stored there is the same. Like those people who visit archive regularly and work on the modern history problems, and like beginners or professional researcher, we know each other because every time we meet together like each other in archive, and total number is just like 15, 20, not more. And it's make like a general situation very depressing, as such kind of number of the interested people and researchers are not enough to force like a transparency, and same time to cover like all possibility about the understanding the all problems of modern history, and especially just catching the last possibility to just take the alternative information from the oral sources. And you see it's interconnected. If you don't know like in detail problem you are interested in, for example like mass terror of 1937, you don't know the personalities who were involved in, and you can't find the trace of those people. Maybe someone is still alive and he holds like a huge and very interesting information which you can't find in the written document nowhere. And it's just generalized problem we have, as there is like we don't have like a global so-called narrative about the newest history. We don't know effects and like a structure, and same time we don't see people like humans, and even like our members of family just in this frame. Last time I had such same speech with the young people in one of the summer school, and I tried to illustrate how like my own family's oral histories and like family micro histories was just like fairy tales in my childhood, because I was not able to just put them in the general frame of the modern history. It was just like some legend and some interesting story, but time after time during our like research activity, I totally just understood the personal responsibility of the closest members of family, link it with the concrete event, for example, like 1922, Swanetti anti-Soviet repressing and collectivization and Second World War, and 1970, 1980 Soviet lifestyle. All these stories just were interpreted and were put in the like this timeline, we can say. And it's like a general problem and global problem, we can say, that we don't see, and we are not like motivated to see our modern history towards the human eyes, and or we have like some very brief, general and dehumanized narration about 20th century history, and it's just not interesting, especially in school, and like young people are saying that that's not my own history, and I don't see like where is place of my family or my city or my province in this frame. And same time we don't have like a big and alternative line of the personal stories which gave us chance to just step back like in a time machine and just see all this panoramic picture of 20th century history towards the person's eye. So it's my attempt to describe the meaning of such kind of testimonies or stories or just explanations towards the concrete people about the Soviet terror and 20th century history, where we can put them and how useful they are. But I should repeat that it's not enough. 200 like a different and not standard oral history are not enough to just step forward. It's sometimes enough for the like in a personal level, like for me and for David and other members of our organization who was working on the oral histories, is it's improves the professional skills. We can say every next oral history is a new experience, and you understand like mistakes you made or like new ways of communication with the person, and it's also just enlarge your like a frame of knowledge, and it grows up you like a professional interview. But generally it's not enough to change something. If some big institution and big number of like volunteers or young researchers or historians would have started some like a very sustainable and long-term activity in the like a different direction. We have only one subject like Soviet terror and survivors and their testimonies, but there's a lot of the questions and lot of the like layers of society's life, which is very interesting and very important to understand our recent past. For example, like economical history and some history of the scientific activities like inside, and like many of the questions depend on the research interest. And to make it like a complex activity, it's a way to just change this like a tragic situation we have now, that if person is interested to find the new end, how to look to the 20th century history, he finds some deadlock. Last time I had such a situation with the employee of the National Museum who was involved in like a history teachers network, and she just asked me help, saying that I decided to make some like a lesson, new style, like based on the new methodology of teaching of history, and I decided to take a subject like a Soviet terror and Soviet life in 1920s, 1930s, and I was sure that I find something in the internet and sources and oral history, and she finds that nonsense. You can't find anything real, even now in 2016. And if you don't know like a researcher or like a person who owns his own like a or oral history collection or some copies from the archive, you are just lost. And it's like our reality, and it illustrates why our like a collective memory is just like a empty page, and why like our society is very tend to be manipulated every time, and why we have such kind of big complex towards the Soviet past and sympathies and like Same time, there's a big a positive feeling towards the personalities like Stalin, even Beria, and I was shocked last time when like a young person, some 15, 16-year-olds boy said that he was a good guy, he made such many infrastructural projects and so on and so on. And yes, it's partly true, but and that's our reality, and it show how we can start to change something, and even this like 6 years as we just working permanently about the finding of the eyewitnesses, and finally when we will able to just open this base and put all these oral histories, and not only oral history, because it was part of the complex activity, just digitizing and collecting the personal archives of those people. They are not only like oral history recording, video or audio files. It's like an oral history, and same time you will able to see photo collection of the same family and the same event, and the documents and some like things like artifacts. It's like a concept of our public archive where we will put all this oral history collection, and it will be like some first step for us to show how it's necessary to work towards the oral history testimonies records, and same time like open some little database of knowledge towards the human eyes about the Soviet life and Soviet terror, and stories of eyewitnesses and survivors. So it's general like representing the frame. You should see all these like concrete stories and oral histories just be collected during this time, and unfortunately I can't demonstrate them like reports because absolute majority of them are Georgian language, and we don't have like English subtitles, and same time it's not like edited files. But I can, if you are interested in, to just talk briefly about the most powerful histories we find and recorded and collected during this time, is like histories which provide those information you can't find in the written documents, and it shows like a real face of Soviet terror, or it shows the complexity of the problem of person versus totalitarian state. And same time I can talk about the personal experience towards the concrete oral history when we started and till today, as we continue finding the people and interviewing them, which of them were like the most interesting and valuable for me, like an interviewee who just teach me something, which was a failure of this ethic and technique of oral history recording, and so on and so on. And it's all I can just provide during our today's conversation. Is I'm just like a medium now between our interviews and like an oral history collection we have, and you like people who plans or are already experienced it, like interviewees with the eyewitnesses. So that's main and difficult and general part of my presentation, and same time we should say that generally like which just unite all oral histories we have it's like a feeling of the trauma, and it's real when we started to be trained in the, like a oral history technique and dealing with the traumatized people, like all trainers and professionals. We are saying that prepare to be traumatized yourself, and prepare to find how people are trying to avoid to speak about such a tragic and painful experience. And when you don't have any kind of practice in this field, you think that it's not true, and maybe it's like some like some just fantastic stories. But in reality, every time you find the person who suffered because of some like state terror or some problems in his or his family's past, you understand how trauma is still with him, how people are even today afraid to speak about openly, and it was a first shock in our like a practice eye. And at the same time you see how you are starting to be traumatized, and after 1, 2, 3 years of just permanent work on the oral histories with the traumatized people, you are just you find yourself just damaged in a like a psychological way. And I should confess, and it's real, and every time I'm saying that after 6 years of the practicing in the oral history record, I just find myself strongly just traumatized, and I have this nervous after all this sharing of the painful experience. And it's true, and if you plan to deal with this like eyewitnesses of tragic event and traumatic past, you should prepare yourself in the psychological way to share this trauma, because it's necessary and you can't avoid this, because it's a basic rule of this communication. You already know, according to all research and guidelines and technique of oral history recording. If you are not involved in communication, and if you don't share the emotion like a person is expressing, you can't lead the interview. You can't just sit outside of this trauma and feelings. And if you want to just make a successful oral history record, you should be part of this communication, and you are just forced to feel the same pain like person feels himself just sharing this traumatic experience. And it's unite all this our oral history records, and same time you find some representation of collective memory in every kind of personal stories they are telling, because during the 20th century history there was so many big and huge events which just are put in the every person's memory. For example, we have we are not asking especially about this subject, but majority of our interview we are just speaking about their own experience around 1953 March event when Stalin died, and what was going on in the street, and how they felt themselves, and how some strange days there was. And according to the fact that it was a huge shock of a Soviet society, every person who is aged like from 1930s, and he or she was big enough in 1953. He remembers like this shocking event and this mass madness which was going on in the Soviet cities and the villages in 1953. And according to this fact, as we have a dozen of such little stories just written in our oral history collection, we can just cut them and make some like a collection, like the Russian Memorial did around the death of Stalin, how people just remember this huge event. And same time you can find trace of same kind event of 20th century history in everything, personal stories people are telling you. So it's some characterizing finding we have according our own practice in our oral history collection, and now maybe it's time to cancel this like a lecture style conversation, and I will be glad to answer your question, and same time I will glad to speak about like some powerful oral history records we have, and just explain briefly the story and finding and experience towards this oral history interview we made during this 6 years. So it's main part of my speech, and I'm very sorry that it's very difficult for me to generalize all this like different information we just accept during this big enough time of working on oral history records. So.
Okay, Irakli, thank you very much. That was very informative. I think, one of the things that you've clearly reminded us is how important knowing about the past is to the present. Your little story about this guy who thought Beria had done some wonderful things for Georgia is an illustration that it's so important to for citizens to understand the past and it will determine in many ways how they look at the world in the present. So thanks for that. I think what I'll do is I'll just open it up for questions. I have one that I'd like to start with. So you talked about the problems of getting access to the archives, in particular the state prosecutor's archives. You don't have access.
Yeah.
It's really very difficult for you. How then have you worked and found the people that you have interviewed?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's necessary to explain our technologies of finding of eyewitnesses. At the very beginning of our activity, it was depend on the personal knowledge, like informal social networks, we can say, when person knows like a relative or some neighbor or some well-known face who was victim or whose members of family were victims of Soviet terror, and when you find first one, you are able to ask him about the same people around him or her, and as usual at the beginning of our research activity, it was a way how to enlarge the number of potential interview like respondents and eyewitnesses. When person was saying that yes, I know like my relative or my schoolmate or my neighbor who is the same like as I, whose family suffered during the Soviet terror, it was one way to find people. And another one is more difficult because of such a problems, but more like a productive way. When you are just dealing with the concrete research question and concrete issue of modern history, and you are able to obtain any kind of the documental sources and make a structural problem you are interested in, and identify the persons who are involved in this question. After it, you are just starting to think how to identify, are those people still alive or not, and if they are not alive, how to find their members of family. In reality, you can try it just like a homework, and or when you just start to make some little research in your academic career, but you find yourself in the same kind of deadlock I mentioned, because finding the like a personal data of the people are same kind restricted part of the archive information. Like a way how they are blocking the access towards this like a state prosecutor office are based on so-called personal information. They say that the name of person and nationality and date of birth and profession and some personal stories which are written on the paper are the personal information, and like a foreign person is not allowed to just read them. And same like a problem is with the so-called at Georgian it sounds like a Sajaru registry, public registry, and where you can find like information about the birth of person, about the members of family, about the like a note about the death and address and the number of the like a telephone. It's closed. Only like employees of this public registry can make access on this database, and you can find, for example, you are working on like a research about the Soviet terror of 1937. You find the criminal case of person, and you know his name, you know the name of the investigator, you know the names of the people who made the decision about his death or exile, and you don't have any kind of machine to just test their personalities or to just make a link with the members of family. And you are just forced to just close this question or find the alternative way of identification. And we was not little bit successful about this alternative way of identification. And sometimes it's not completely legal, and but we find the like a hole in this like a public registry system, some little hole. Yeah, it's not like a crime, but it's not illegal, we can say. And every time I use this way about the identification of the persons and the address, and it's like it helps any kind of research we are dealing with, not only like finding the witnesses. And the most like a difficult way, but it's almost and same time successful testifiers, is to just continue just catching the trace after the date you find the first personality. For example, you find the name of victim and the investigator in 1937, and you have the like address book and the book of the telephones of 1936 or 1929, and you should just analyze them, find the same personality, find the address, and translate the like address, because the name of the streets were changing many times during the 20th century, and because of it you need the like another address books which shows the change of the address during 20th century, and you need the maps from the different time of 20th century to find the address, and you are going to this address and looking to the electricity equipment, rich reliefs, where the name of the people are written who lives there, or in some old houses in Tbilisi you can see like old banner of like a list of the citizens who live there, and if there is nothing, you are just knocking on the door and asking the oldest person or oldest inhabitant of this yard or this house, and asking him, do you remember person like a name like this who lived there in 1930s or maybe 1940s? And as usual he said that I have no idea because I started to live here from 1960s, but I just know a person who was living there but he went somewhere and he's starting to just search his number in this like a list of telephones and call, and it's like a reality of such kind of research. And finally, if you are lucky and the trace is like sustainable, you find the person and you are able to just prepare and start conversation. And you see it's like some detective movie, but unfortunately like our reality is when you can do it in like a one click in like a modern database which exists but which is close to the big audience or some usual citizens, and it's according to our experience. But another subject in this question I should speak about is that it's difficult, but sometimes it's necessary to do, because during this search and during this adventure to the person, you find so many additional information, so many stories and some facts and some interesting leads around your history, that you are more prepared to ask questions and find some unknown part of the story.
So it's a way of informing yourself.
Yes, and I can just speak about a lot of stories, how many useful information you gather from the neighbors and old friends and relatives before you go to a person you are just interested in.
Okay, Irakli, I'm going to... So Elena, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah. Thank you, Irakli. It was a very interesting presentation. I have two questions. One is related to about the interview. How do you interview people? Do you have a special structure or questions? Because you mentioned that you should be the part of the story, and how do you manage it? I mean, do you ask the questions, and what kind of questions they are, if you do? And another question is, okay, let's say this is the first thing I would.
So yes, of course, because as I just said some few minutes before, it's always good way to go to the oral sources after a big detailed research, because you know what to ask and you know the structure of the history according to different sources, and you are able to just plan before where you want to just touch or sometimes provoke the memory of the person who was involved in. Because when you are just going to the stranger, just briefly inform that he was part of such kind of story, or he was a victim, or he was working in the institution you are interested in, you have two possibilities. Just prepare the general question according to the general knowledge of the problem, and it's sometimes it works, and when you are not able to prepare before because the sources are unavailable and even more they does not exist, and you are depend only to the person you should interview. But you can just plan before, according the global knowledge of problem, like a structure of questions, and every time we do. But it doesn't mean that it's work every time in reality, because every individual person is different, and the knowledge and the memory is different in every time, and you are a planning structure of the question ruins in the first 2-3 minutes, and at first time it's very stressing, and I personally lost some brilliant stories at the beginning of our activity, because when you are just knocking the door saying hello, and or before you call by the phone saying that I'm going to visit you to talk about the subject, just opening the door and saying the hello and so on and so on, person just saying the story or some brilliant information during first 3 minutes before you turn on a dictaphone or the camera, and it's very stressing and it's very difficult, because he's just it's not always like this, but in many cases we had such information, experience when person puts the top of the memory and top of the stories in a first part of the conversation, even before the starting the official record, we can say, and you are just forced to go back to the story he told already, but not on a record, later, just after the long conversation, and when you are just already close to the person, and he just lost the sense of the third person or the camera or the dictaphone, and you are just slightly trying to just go back and a little bit force him or provoke him to tell the same story again, and it works because according to practice of the oral history philosophy, we can say the same story told in the different time are always different, because the person just remembers it every time once again, and sometimes it's a very brief, sometimes it's a very detailed, sometimes it's some little bit different, and because of it, it's like a good way or idealistic solution of the problem when you don't end your conversation or your relation with the respondent during 2 or 3 hours or during one day. You can just keep the contact and go back after 1 week or a month. I had the practice, I just interviewing the same person in the next year, and it gives you a chance to just take the maximum of information.
So you asked about the event or about his or her personal story?
Yes, and it's another subject to discuss, when in which kind of or in which side of the personal memory you are interested in. You know that a leading part in the philosophy of the oral history record is the personal view and personal experience. When you are asking the story, life story, and person is just speaking about his own experience, and same time about his point of view or his conclusions about the a story he experienced it. But same time, and sometime maybe it's going to be base for the discussion, you are not, it's not enough. And when you are just informed about the event in details, and you know like a storyline from the different sources, mainly from the original documents, which was just like a created same time when event just was going on. Only like a general memory from the person about the event is not enough, and you are just tapping a little bit in the dangerous way when you are starting to be a little bit like an investigator, when you are asking not open question but so-called closed question, just focused on the detail of the story to check reality. And it's and we can discuss, and every time I'm just thinking about this problem when I'm working on the oral history. Is it good way or not? Like a philosophy of oral history, subject is that you trust person, you give him a chance to tell the story how he just remember it, or how he wants to just speak about, and you are not stressing him, saying that it's not look like a true. But when you are like a historian and you are working to just solve some historical problem, and you are informed in detail, and you can reconstruct that reality even in hours, and you have the person who was involved in and who has some responsibility, or you are sure that he knows more he is telling, you are very like a difficult situation, how to turn from this like a trust environment when you are saying, tell me story, how you remember and how you just want to represent it, and same time you know that he's lying, or maybe he just confused something, not like because he want to lie, but he don't remember.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult.
Sorry? Like then it exists, and the person just it's not he isn't clear whether it was in 1990 whatever, or like 3 years later or something, and the respondent is mixing, and on what you do.
I just said it like exam. Sometimes he just makes a mistake deliberately. He just don't remember the exact place or person or like a date, and that's not problem. You can say that, sorry, maybe it was another one, or I know from this another oral history or from the documents that it was in Kutaisi, not in Batumi, or so. It's not problem. But when person are just changing the reality, just or lying or hiding something, and I can just illustrate it according to my most favorite oral history I ever made during work.
Can I stop you there now?
It's problematic.
I want to get 2 or 3 questions in from the students. So, Iveta?
Okay, so my question was, because you told about this questionnaire and preparation before you go to the respondent. What is kind of your first question, like how you start the interview? So because most of the people start with telling the stories, but it will be interesting from your experience. What is the good way to start?
It's not the standard one.
Okay.
At the beginning, you are thinking that as this planned question or the glossary of the problems you should discuss is just like easy and well prepared and structured. But during some a long experience, you understand that best way to start conversation is the informal one. Not asking the question, but explaining your personality, subject you are interested in, where you see the place of this person in this story. You are saying that I'm informed that you was working there, and I'm just hoping to get some information for you. And when you are just making the environment informal and not stressing person with your person like a question list and your like a type recorder and so on and so on, it's good way. And same time you just forcing him to be like a more open and informal. And same time after the like a long experience, you find how like your point of view about the place of oral history, like interview and exchange of the experiences just ruins. You imagine yourself like an interviewer sitting in the room in the quiet place, so-called tete-a-tete with your respondent and with your like a camera and list and so on. It's good way to have a talk, but time after time when you are getting more and more experience, it's a place of oral history recording, maybe like some crazy place. Last time me and Dato recorded very interesting story, not like a eyewitness, but about the family experience in a car, just driving, and just driver stops the car and starts to tell the brilliant story of the father, and I just managed to turn on camera, and we recorded like a 10-15 minutes narration in like a middle of the highway, just in a car. And someone can say that it's not a standard oral history and it's a violation of rules and not a good way to do it. But in reality, when you are just very experienced and you just like a magnet, just getting information from around, you just don't pay attention about this little like standard things, and you are just ready to catch information everywhere and every time. And maybe it's like some perfection or something according to the personal experience, but sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's more successful place and successful environment for the communication than sitting in like a neutral and very quiet place. And
Can I see if there's anybody else, because we have about 10 minutes or so. Anybody else wants to ask a question?
What about the other family members are attending the interview, how it works, like what's this?
Like, I want to say something too.
Yeah.
Yes, it's also some not the standard solution when like a best way to record the oral history is to have the one person. And I also like I agree, and like experience shows that it's true, and you always should try to get person like a tete-a-tete, and it's best way. But sometimes it's very difficult, and sometimes it's almost impossible to avoid some strange people around, and even more the members of family. And it's changed situation strongly, because you have in reality group interview, not the personal one, and it's always different one, because instead of the fact that they are the closest persons, members of family, they affect each other. Sometimes such like a family interview, and we have some 3 or 4 example like it, for example in Ajara and in Kutaisi, and when not only 2 persons, like the whole family is sitting in a room, and we are planning to talk with the one person who is a main, like a eyewitness. But everyone is sitting around and listen to the story, and at the same time they are starting to tells the same story from the different eye, or just puts some additional details in the mail line.
What do you
It's
see as a
not
solution?
the standard one and best one, but same time it's very interesting, like example, like a micro collective memory. You have the whole family like one unity represented, and they are just giving you the whole panoramic picture of the memory of this family. But if you are able to continue your communication with the person and manage to speak with him personally, it will be the solution to have both of them. Because in every society, and especially in our society, it's very difficult to ask the people, let's please leave us like alone and go outside. Even more when they can't go anywhere because they have one room.
Amika?
Yeah, I had a question about how you get people to agree to doing the interviews, because I understand you put a lot of time and effort in tracking these people, so you have quite a strong incentive to make them speak, I guess. So I wonder, do you encounter people who don't want to speak, or who might even be upset that you have been contacting a lot of people in their surroundings before you came to them?
So it's every time depends on the person and some like a case. And as you are just doing a lot of like communication before you go directly to the person, like to record him, you are or just calling on the phone, explaining who you are and what you want, or asking to the person who helped you find this man or the woman to call him or her and explain the situation, that person is interested in you, and let's meet and tell your story. Sometimes we use this like a effect of the shock, when you are just finding person and same time knocking on the door and saying that hello, I'm like a researcher and I'm interested in your story or about your parent or about you personally. And as usually a majority of them are very surprised and very glad that someone is interested in your personal experience, and even more when they are the aged people and like a general sense in our society is that no one is interested in history, and even more in like old people, and you are like a young person coming and saying that hello, I'm very interested in your like experience. It works, and person is just glad to have a communication, and it also helps and sometimes makes this situation when he immediately is just starting to tell this like a main part of the story in the first 5 minutes, and you can't just manage to do this like a how does it call, like this necessary part, explaining your personality, asking for the permission, explain that I am recording it by the typewriter or on a video and how it will be represented. You should do it before you just tell no. It's just like a basic rule, and you never should just violate this
But
one.
you don't ever encounter people who say, well, it's
We
very
have-
nice of you to come, but no, I don't want
Yes,
to
we
share
had.
this, or that was not
I
the
had
case.
such a experience with some few people, and when person is not just like when he is just like he feel himself uncomfortable and he don't want to speak about his life, you don't have any like tools to force him. And only way is just to be extremely polite and some like use the last chance to explain how important his information is for you and not for you, for the like science or for the society. And I had such a like unpleasant experience in very beginning of my research activity, when I interviewed maybe first person in this a classic way. He was a member of the Georgian military unit of the Wehrmacht during Second World War, and he was one of the organizers of the uprising of island Texel in Netherlands in the April-May of 1945, and he is not now still alive. He passed away some 3 or 4 years ago, but I recorded him in 2009. He was living in Manglisi, it's a little resort city up to Tbilisi, and I went there. I find the person according to asking to the people in Manglisi, and I just knocked on the door, and he was not so glad to see me as some strange person asking questions, and even more who doesn't call before. And it was impossible because he don't had any phone in the Manglisi house, and he refused, saying that I have something to do and I'm not busy and now I can talk with you. And I just started to just saying that I went from Tbilisi and I can't stay in Manglisi because I don't know anyone around, and I should go back and come back again if you agree some. And finally he said, okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we're running out of time, and I know that Tamari had a question, and then Oliver. So Tamari?
I will say very briefly. So you had experience working with victims mostly on the repression, yeah? Have you any experience working with the oppression's family members, and what's their attitude toward telling the story of?
Not directly, and it's a subject of David's experience, and he will just speak about it in details. But as I started to tell the concrete stories from my experience, I had some few person respondents with the responsibility around the tragedy, I can say. This last person I mentioned, organizer of the uprising in the Texel, he was a war crime, I can say, a researcher, because he was an officer of the German army, a lieutenant, and it was a big enough a rank for the former Red Army soldier who joins the German army, and he was a closest person to the military counterintelligence in the Wehrmacht system, and he was put in the a Georgian Wehrmacht unit an informer, and lately he organized the uprising against his bosses, and half of the forces, a battalion, up to the 1,000 soldiers, more than 500 died in this battle. And lately, when a Canadian army just went in this island, they were just they communicated each other, and this group of survivors were handed to the Soviet authority. And he went back like a hero who just organized uprising about the Nazis. But he blackmailed the real military leaders of this uprising, and even more some usual soldiers, because they knew the personality of this man I talked with, because he was a more enemy-like towards the Soviet states than just usual soldier who was a soldier of Red Army and captured by the Germans and joins the German army like a soldier, not the officer, but he was officer and very just glad to serve in the German army. And as according to the documents I prepared before and after the talk with this man whose name was Evgeny Artemidze, and even more, I just copied his personal archive and till today I think that he could not realize what I was doing in, because I was just taking the copy by the little digital camera, and maybe he could not realize that it was a photo camera. And according to this personal archive, I realized that he was just main like a war criminal in this uprising, because he manipulated these soldiers, saying that only way to survive is the uprising, and many of them died in this battle. It was nonsense, because it started in the end of the April of 1945, when just German army was going to surrender, and there was no logical way to fight against them. And according to this blood and according to this battle, he just planned his future in the Soviet Union, saying that we were leaders of uprising against the Nazis, and we were just prisoners here. And you see, he was with a big responsibility, and it was very difficult to ask him some little unpleasant questions, and it was not my successful oral history record, and even though it was a first attempt by my side to go this way, but it was very just interesting and valuable towards this side, to understand where you interviewer, a researcher, you trust story told by the person, or you are just a little bit more like an investigator, and you should just remind him some not pleasant experience he did. So
Okay, good, thank you. I know, very quick, Oliver, and a quick answer, and there will be opportunity to talk to Irakli
yeah,
over. You're going to be here for lunch?
yeah.
Good. Have a good time.
I have a question.
And I can just demonstrate some little document towards the stories, not to just only talking and not just giving you some visual side of the stories. So.
You mentioned that there are 15 people maximum that are dealing with Soviet past in Georgia. Are they all active members of SOVLA?
No.
How many people are involved in the active work of SOVLA?
In SOVLA, researchers, we are extremely few, maximum 4 or 5, including the young researchers, beginners, who are now working on just some routine and black part of the research activity, collecting the data, just working in the newspapers, just putting or just cutting that information we are interested in, and doing it this mechanical stuff sometime, and starting to get closer to the subject. And a most active and I can say a little bit experienced part of researcher staffs are represented here, me and David, who are still in SOLAB and leading the research line of this organization and planning and so on and so on. And you see it's extremely little number, and when I said that there are some 15-20%, I mean all people who I have seen in these archives, including the Georgia and sometimes the foreigners who are just coming back, not only just spending there some 1 to 3 days, just taking some little bit information, who are just permanently interested in the modern history issues of the Georgia and the Caucasus and the Soviet Union.
Okay, I think we have to stop there. Unfortunately, because it's been absolutely fascinating listening. I think that what Irakli done is uncovered some of the real difficulties of oral interviews in a very practical way. So I want to thank him for that, because this is what we're trying to learn here. And I hope you will be open to people tapping you on the shoulder and asking more questions over coffee and over lunch. So thank you very much.
And so